Okay. Hello, Facebook audience.
Yeah.
Welcome to
back.
Finishing Well.
Well, I'm excited about today's show because it's kind of a fascinating study today. It's IRAs trusting the hand of God. And I got a little story, as often is the case, that kind of goes behind that. We're finishing well with certified financial planner Hans Scheil, but we've been talked a lot about my father on this show, and now, he's under hospice care and things are winding down, and it's a different season in our lives for sure. But my dad, he's got double vision now; he can't read, and he's bed ridden, so he's destined to watch TV all day, which was driving me crazy. And I was like, Dad, I need to read you a book. And a friend of mine, and Hans, and my dad all love dogs. James Banks, who does Disciple Magazine with us, and Hans knows him well, a wonderful pastor. He found this book by Philip Keller, who wrote the Shepherd's Guide to the 23rd Psalm on lessons from a sheepdog. And one of the lessons that he teaches in this book, it's a fabulous book. I was reading it to my dad, but it actually taught me quite a bit, is that, he kind of gets it out of 1 Peter 5:6, where you humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, that he might exalt you in due time. He was talking about that a sheepdog, in order to be really good, needs to be controlled by hand signs rather than by voice commands, because if you're yelling across the field, stop, stay, go to the left, it freaks the sheep out and it upsets their diet, etc. So the idea of a really, really intimate relationship between shepherd and sheepdog would be done with hand signs. And he said, you get this point in your walk with Christ where, you understand the Bible and you understand what his voice commands were, don't covet and those kind of things. But what do you do with the providence, with the hand of God, as you see certain things come into your life? And really your whole story, Hans, on how Ed Slott and Dr. Bob, this was all reading hand signs because God had something to teach you. And you had to be humble because you've been doing this stuff your whole life, but you didn't realize that really IRAs are a different thing.
Well, yeah, it was my choice to focus on people, let's say 60 and over, heavy focus on people turning 65 to do my work. And obviously IRAs and IRA knowledge is a big part of that, and really planning and knowledge and experience. And so I'd always heard about this guy, Ed Slott, but my thinking was, am I going to pay $2,000 in travel expenses and the time to go fly to New York or somewhere else, sit in a meeting room for 2 days and learn about this IRA wisdom from this guy, Ed Slott? And so one of my clients who came to me and just became a very good friend and a very good Christian man, and he was a dentist and retired many years, and so I was able to help him. He came to us through Medicare supplements, through my brother, and I was able to help him by taking his IRA money and using it to purchase long-term care policies. This whole story's in my book. If you read the book, you'll become familiar with it. And really, out of this thing, he ended up giving me Ed Slott's book, which he had gotten off of public television, asked me to read it, see what I thought of it, and I actually used what was in the book to go back and do a whole bunch more planning for him, of which I was very well compensated. So I made great commissions. Dr. Bob was very happy for that. I told him what they were as a fiduciary, and decided that I was going to use part of that commission to go attend Ed Slott's class. And another part of that, Dr. Bob had a mission of getting Bibles into China, and so I gave a very substantial donation to that mission, which made me feel really good. And so the crux of the story is I go into this Ed Slott training, which is specialty. He's like America's IRA expert, thinking, I've got a lot of education. I got a CFP, I got a CLU, I got a master's degree. I've got, what's he going to teach me about IRAs that I don't already know? And it was about 10 minutes into this thing. I was like, man, I already had a page of notes and just boy, I couldn't have been more wrong in my opinion of what I was going to get out of that. And it wasn't so much new information, it was the effective application of the information to help people. And where I just learned, just like I did in the book reading for Dr. Bob, just a whole new way to look at IRAs and to help people plan on those, and specifically to try to reduce the tax bill on IRAs.
And I hope our listeners are catching what, Hans is sharing. That what we talked about is trusting these hand signals of God. So God, at this point in time, Hans, you just open up your practice. So you're not like, I need to go invest money right this minute, $2,000 worth of training or something. But God brought Dr. Bob into your life. And through that, the book, right? And
Sure.
Another part of the story that I happen to know is you sold Dr. Bob $300,000 worth of life insurance from his IRA distributions that he was getting while you were going to, right before you went to the Ed Slott thing. And so now you come back, right?
Yeah.
Because we're seeing God bringing Ed Slott into your life, brought Dr. Bob in your life. But then, right shortly, a few weeks later, what happened?
Dr. Bob passed away.
Right.
He had just passed a life insurance physical.
Right. So all that money and Dr. Bob, obviously he was telling you he wanted to go see Jesus, right? But God brought these things in, and obviously a whole lot more Bibles went to China as a result of Dr. Bob going to heaven. And it's more than cool to me that he gave you a foundational understanding of IRAs that we want to share in today's show a little bit of things that really changed your whole practice.
Well, they did. Because just about everybody that's coming up on 65, they've got some money in an IRA. I mean, in fact, if they have money, most of it is in an IRA. And so what I learned from Ed Slott is you better have a plan to pay the taxes on that. Because the whole thing has been about avoiding the taxes. That's all the whoopee. We got all this money and we don't have to pay taxes on the growth. We didn't have to pay taxes. We got a tax deduction for putting it in there. And some people with a good stock market rally have got big balances. And they're kind of on Happy Street about them, and they should be. That's awesome.
Right. So we want to mention, as always, that our show is, finishing well, but it's based on Hans's book, The Complete Cardinal Guide to Planning for and Living in Retirement, which today's chapter is one of the 7 worries of the 7 worries tab at Cardinal Guide. Don't forget the guide after Cardinal, cardinalguide.com. And that chapter on IRAs, of course, is free to get the PDF. Or, as always, Hans, you can just go on the website and contact them, tell them, send me out the book, give them your name and address, and you'll send it. I mean, you want them to have the information. And this IRA thing that, is just, one of the basics that I learned early in the shows, but it's there in your book clearly, on that very beginning page, is that there's a big difference between a Roth IRA and a traditional IRA. And so when you say that most people coming into 65, they haven't paid tax because those aren't our Roth IRAs, because that's the difference between a Roth IRA and a traditional IRA.
I don't have the exact numbers on here, but a small percentage of the overall IRA money is in a Roth right now. There aren't that many people that have taken advantage of that. So I would like through the show to change that a bit, and am changing it a bit. But what I'm speaking about is just the people walking into my office. Most of them have some money. Okay, they've got to make it last the whole of their retirement, and most of the money they do have is in an IRA or a 401k or something that's like an IRA, and a smaller percentage of their money is in what we would call a regular bank account or a regular brokerage account where they've already paid taxes on the money. So this is a big deal for retirees. And what is an even bigger deal is how are you going to pay the taxes on that? Because the IRS is going to get their money. I mean, I say this.
Yeah, they'd rather you took out all of it in one fell swoop. But, we had a listener of the podcast in Indiana.
We did.
That you actually, helped them see a strategy at a younger age that kind of surprised them that they could be making Roth IRA contributions right now rather than traditional. It's something that
This is the guy in Pennsylvania, so we got our states off a little bit, but
just goes to show what I know.
that's all right. And the gentleman, these folks are younger. We've been talking about these 3 clients that came to me in January of 2019, and they came as a result of the podcast, which is they just found the podcast somewhere, whereas most of our way out-of-state clients are going to find the book on Amazon or something like that and just call us randomly. These are people that are picking up the podcast somehow, which is kind of cool. And this guy, he's very smart, for one thing. They're very deep and committed Christians, and they're savers, like a lot of Christians, and they have a lot of money in a lot of accounts. And between meeting 1 and meeting 2, in meeting 1, he told me that he wants to get more money in a Roth IRA. So he'd listened to like 34 of the shows, and he had gotten out of that this for both you and your wife. They're both highly paid software technical people, and I said, see if they have a Roth option for your contributions. And he was saying, I don't think they do. They're kind of backward at this one, and I don't think hers does. And I said, well, if they don't, then we'll sit down and we'll look at some other things. We can maybe do what's called a backdoor Roth IRA, and I don't want to get into that so much today, although a different show. So by the time we get this guy on the second show, he had already researched a second meeting, which was like a week later. He had already researched it, found out that the Roth was eligible on both of them, and the Roth contribution, and they were putting $50,000 a year, or they are putting $50,000 a year now after tax into Roths. And he had already calculated that when he retires in 5 to 7 years, he's going to have like $400,000.
Right, and since that is a Roth IRA, now he has the other already taxed income sitting on the sidelines to pay tax on the other traditional IRA, right, that you were talking about that he would need.
Well, he does, but he's actually probably not going to convert that. So we're just going to have 2 buckets of money. We're going to have the traditional IRA, and we're going to live off of that and pay the taxes on that, and then we're going to have the Roth IRA, and then he's going to have some regular savings, and then and plus he's going to have Social Security. So we're going to be able to take 4 different buckets of money and decide what our income and our taxable income is going to be in any given year. Pretty cool.
So yeah. And there's so much that we've got coming up for you in the next segment, because we haven't even begun to talk about QCDs or minimum distribution or all this IRA stuff. But the point that you want to make on this show is that IRAs are a different breed of cat because of the tax ramifications.
That's it.
And there's all sorts of neat strategies that God has provided via Ed Slott and other things that we want to make you available at Cardinal Guide. Don't forget the guide after Cardinal.com. We'll be right back.
Thank you.
So this show is IRAs, and this show will actually air in March.
Mm-hmm. March 2nd, our anniversary.
Really?
Yep. I'm taking Rhonda to Nassau, Bahamas.
It's a dirty
for a
job that
3-day
somebody
weekend.
has to do.
Yeah.
That's fun.
Yeah.
That's really fun.
Well, it's our anniversary, our 34th anniversary, and we
That's awesome. 34 years.
so I surprised her with that on Valentine's Day. Yeah.
You've been married longer than me. That's impressive.
Yeah.
Of course,
Especially for her.
All right. Welcome back to Finishing Well. Today's show, IRAs, trusting the hand of God. We're talking about as we enter into a more intimate relationship with our master, and trying to please our master, are we ready for the hand signs? As sometimes things change up drastically in your life. Are you ready as God brings those in, to respond to the hand of God, like they bring somebody in your, and as it says in 1 Peter, 5, are you going to humble yourself and realize, man, I don't know anything? And I love what John Bunyan said about the valley of humiliation. That the soil in the valley of humiliation is the richest. It comes off the mountains, and there where we admit we don't know much, we can dig in our roots and begin to learn some stuff, right? And that's what Ed Slott helped you understand.
Well, he did. And I really learned about 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 basic things. And that's all I put in my book, is just the basics. And it's getting a deeper understanding and planning for these things. Like just something that jumps off the book is your beneficiary designations. Is if you don't have those right, this money is going to go to the wrong person or the wrong cause. I mean, we got many stories, and Ed Slott shared with many stories of like ex-wives and that are still listed, and then you get into a suit between the current wife and the ex-spouse, and situations with children, or that people left it just to the estate. I mean, there's a lot of people never look at a beneficiary and an IRA, and every IRA that's out there has a beneficiary designation on it, and whatever it says on that beneficiary, that's where the money's going. I don't care what it says in your will. I don't care any of that stuff. If you haven't updated that, lady, everybody that's listening, get it out. A lot of these places will show it to you what it is online, and you can also download a change form right online. You can fill it out and send it in to them, and make sure that money ends up going to who you want it to go to.
Yeah, and same thing with your life insurance. That
Yeah.
it doesn't go to, what the will says. It goes to who the beneficiary is listed, and that's a great point. And another reason, that just reading through the book, brings out these things that are just practical information. But again, we got another story from another podcast listener, which I want to say one real quick. Go to iTunes, subscribe, and these things will go right into your, iPhone, and you can listen to them, whenever you want to.
Yeah, you can get it on Spotify. All the podcasts on the list is there. Finishing Well, Hans Scheil, and I think it's just really cool that people all over the country are listening to this thing, and then some of them call us, and that's not just for me. I mean, as we talked earlier, is that God in some way feels that they're going to benefit from something that I'm going to teach them. And this gentleman is calling me from Indiana, and he has become a client, and he and his wife, and the two of them are, he's 61, she was 64 and just turned 65, and we talked about them on the Social Security show. But now we're over to the IRA show, and we're going to talk about what we're recommending and what we've recommended to them to do with their IRA money. I mean, first of all, this gentleman has done a wonderful job of being a steward of his money, and he's got right at $1 million of IRA money, which, way to go. I mean, that's just awesome. And then he's got $200,000 of not IRA money, or what we call non-qualified money, just money in a brokerage account. And just about every penny that he's got is invested in stocks, okay? And that's worked out well for him, but my concern is that now you're retired. You just retired, and now we got to live off this for the rest of our life, and I don't want you to get into your 60s and 70s and 80s and having to be, watching the stock market every day and kind of trembling. I mean, from my experience, people in the 70s and 80s that are invested in stocks, they get very little joy out of the upticks in the market, and they get a lot of anguish and fear and pain out of the downticks. And so doesn't mean he's not going to be in stocks, but I'm recommending to him that he diversify and he get into some bonds and some safer investments. And to do that, he's going to have to accept a lower return. So what we're going to talk about on this show is he's still 10 years away from minimum distributions. He's got a Social Security check that's going to start coming in next year. So he really needs to pull a good little bit out this year. And when you start pulling money out of your IRA to live off of and you create an income, now you got two potential downdrafts in your balances. One is the money you're pulling out to live on. Say he pulls out 60 grand or 70 grand or 80 grand this year, pays taxes on it. And then let's say that there was a market downturn of, 10% or there's another 100 grand. So when you start distributing your IRA, you really need to be smart about your investment strategy. And that's really what he's hired us to do, and we've done that, and we've gone through all the money, and we've made recommendations of how he would get this more conservative. And he's going to need to accept a lower return for that, a lower average return, and he is prepared to accept that. He tell you a couple other facts about him is he has early Parkinson's disease, which makes him ineligible for really any traditional type of long-term care insurance, including the hybrids. So that long-term care insurance became real important to him as soon as he found out he couldn't get it. And so we have a way to take, especially with somebody with this much money, to take a piece of their IRA and cordon it off into something very safe, an annuity with guaranteed values that's going to create this fund for future income and long-term care expenses. So we're going to kill a whole bunch of birds with one stone with this. We're going to get more conservative investments. We're going to get an income that you can't outlive. So once he turns the income off on this thing, many years in the future, whatever he chooses to do it, the longer he waits, the more it is, that income will continue for the rest of his life and his wife's life. So it's only when the second one passes that the income stops. So that income could pay out way more than what's accumulated in the annuity. That's all guaranteed by the insurance company. But the real sweet thing for him is whatever that income is, if he is to need long-term care, the benefit amount doubles. So I'm going to just throw out some numbers to you just quickly. These won't sound real exciting because they're guaranteed, but for him, I just remember the numbers. We just explained it to him earlier in the week. At 10 years from now, or beginning the 11th year, at guaranteed, that means that the stock market has performed flat. I mean, there's been no gains in the stock market. He's just gotten the guaranteed out of the policy. And if that happens, he could turn on an income for $15,000 a year that will last for the rest of both of their lives. Now, if at any time during the rest of their life, one of them needed long-term care, that income will double, and it'll stay doubled for up to 5 years. And then when that person passes on or gets out of care, it'll just go back to the amount that it was, and it'll keep on coming in until they're both gone.
Then what happens if there's anything left in the account?
If there's anything left in the account, then it'll go to the beneficiary. Okay?
Wow.
But if one of them lives into their 90s, and they turn this on in their 70s, there ain't going to be anything left in the account. I mean, I just tell you the numbers, but that's the guaranteed. Now, the more probable non-guaranteed numbers, those numbers become $22,000 a year for the rest of both of their lives, and the guaranteed or the doubler for long-term care is $45,000 a year. That's what we're really after, is if he's to need long-term care, that we would turn on the income and we would have an extra $45,000 a year coming in for 5 years to at least help with the long-term care expenses and home health care. And he's basically going to live off of the other $800,000 and what that produces. So that's kind of an oversimplified approach. I certainly don't want anybody to run out or call me up and say, I want one of those based upon that. But there are ways for people with health conditions, and they have some savings, either IRA or not IRA savings, and they've got pretty severe health conditions to still get some protection for long-term care. It's kind of cool.
It's very cool. But we couldn't do a show on IRAs without talking about QTCs, QCDs.
QCDs.
Right.
Qualified Charitable Distributions. And so we talk about these on every show. They're so relevant for church people because church people, many of them are tithers or some portion thereof, and they like to deduct their tithe from their taxes. And with the new tax law, many people are using the standard deduction, so they're not getting the full benefit or any benefit from their contributions. And if you're over 70 and a half and you have an IRA, you can donate your minimum distribution or more directly to your church under a qualified charitable distribution. You don't pay any taxes on the distribution, and you meet the minimum distributions. It's a wonderful way to get the full tax benefit of giving to the kingdom. So,
Right. And so if your tithe goes that way, the money that you would have given for your tithe, then could be used in other purposes. And so it's a way to, again, leverage those IRAs because they are a different animal.
Robbie and I have taken this show out to churches. This is what we talk about in the church, and then whatever the topic of the show is that night. But we also do a program, extended program in the church, besides what we're recording, because what a great thing is that you have a lot of seniors who are just taking the minimum distribution, people over 70 and a half. They got money stuffed in an IRA. Okay, they're going to leave this to their kids, most likely, which is fine, but their kids are going to end up paying all the taxes on it, and so they have to take minimum distributions. They're usually just saving the amount after they pay the taxes. This is a wonderful way for the older folks in a church that want to take some of their savings and direct it toward the kingdom. So we come out and do the radio show for the older folks in the church, some of the younger folks, depending as well. And we do the show, and then we have a short program, give them all a copy of my book. And I mean, QCD, I don't really hear too many people talking about it. I mean, it's not in the press, but it's a wonderful advantage for people over 70 and a half, facing minimum distributions, a way you can give directly to God.
Yeah, and again, as he points out, and we'll point out again, cardinalguide.com, who brings you, obviously, finishing well, but if you go to cardinalguide.com and tell us your church, or, just say, I wish you'd talk to my pastor, or I wish you'd talk to my Sunday school teacher, or whatever. We'd be happy to talk to him for you. If you would like to have us come out and record right there live in your church, we would be absolutely delighted to do that. For lots of reasons, because we see how it leverages the kingdom, and we've seen it in the churches that, actual fruit from the people that have attended these before, and how God, or they're actually kind of doing what we're talking about today, seeing the hand of God, and humbling themselves under it to go, wow, there's these kind of opportunities. So
we have people beating a path to our door after these things, and we've got an office in Durham, we got an office in Greensboro, we got an office in Charlotte, and anywhere in North Carolina, we can come out to your church and put on a program. We'd be honored to do that.
Well, great show again, Hans. Thanks.
Thank you.